little talk by the looks of it. We've just got Corey's here, and obviously a couple of other people as well. So let me just share my screen. I will introduce myself in the sort of course of the slides. Basically, I'm gonna talk to you about how to be sustainable-ish in an hour. So obviously it's going to be a broad overview. We're not going to cover everything, but my aim really, I guess, is that you get some ideas and hopefully you leave feeling a little bit kind of inspired and hopefully empowered at the kind of difference that that we can make as individuals and as households and things. So let me share my screen. Hopefully that's working. I'll put the chat over there. If you do, you know, we'll try and I know there's only a couple of you here, but if we try and make it relatively interactive, you know, if you do want to pop anything into the chat, if there's like, oh, I didn't know that, or that's interesting or whatever, then please do that, and I will try and make sure we have some time at the end in case anybody has any questions. So let's get going. So just, I promised I would introduce myself. A very brief introduction. I always start off by saying I'm an ordinary knackered mum of two. And I say that because I sometimes think that we feel like we've got to be, I don't know, Greta or David Attenborough or a climate scientist or, you know, a real expert on something in order to sort of maybe stick our heads a little bit above the parapet and say, oh yeah, no, actually I'm quite keen to try and do something to make a difference. So if you know, if I can do these things and make these changes, then I guarantee you absolutely anybody can. And my sort of journey, if you like, I hate that sort of term, but my air quotes journey into sustainability started when we spent a year buying nothing new, and that was sort of 8 or 9 years ago. That started, when did we start that? September 2012. And it was just a very naive decision. I thought it might be quite fun. We've got 2 boys, and at the time they were sort of 4 and 2, so they were very little, so they didn't really get much say in it. And my husband did that thing that I think a lot of husbands do, of sort of, yes dear, you know, go along with it, anything for a quiet life, and hoping that I would get distracted and sort of come up with something else. And sadly I did. Well, goodly that's not even a word, thankfully I didn't. So we spent this year buying nothing new. I think prior to that, like I say, it was quite a naive challenge. I'd thought we were pretty green, like we did our recycling. Surely what else was there for us to do? Like, you know, you can't expect us to do anything else, can you? We can't possibly make a difference. And to a certain degree, I think sort of looking away quite unconsciously, but you know, it's, bear in mind, this was nearly 10 years ago. You know, we were still talking about global warming and climate change rather than the sort of the terminology that we now use in terms of climate crisis and climate emergency. And, you know, it didn't have the sort of the awareness, I think, that it does now. But even so, I think, you know, I sort of thought, oh, well, you know, it can't be, it does feel a bit uncomfortable buying 2 t-shirts for £5, but you know, surely it must be all right, otherwise they wouldn't be allowed to do these things. And you know, like I said, surely we can't make a difference as an individual, and we need other people to be doing, the governments and businesses and things to be doing their bit, and that we need you know, that completely lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, we hadn't really given much thought to what we were buying, other than kind of, you know, where we could where we might be able to find it cheapest, where there might be a sale, that kind of thing. It genuinely hadn't occurred to me to think about who might have made something, where it might have been made, what we were going to do with it afterwards, all those kinds of things. And that year really did force me to confront that and to really start asking these questions. And I don't know if any of you will remember, in I think it was 2013 was the year of the Rana Plaza factory collapse in Bangladesh. So this was during our year buying nothing new, and it really kind of thrust fast fashion into the spotlight. And I think, you know, prior to that year we spent, if you'd asked me where are my clothes made, I would have just said in a factory, and I just assumed, or in my head, it was just this great big machine, and it just needed a couple of people maybe to sort of press a few buttons and keep an eye on what's going on. And it really sort of highlighted to me the fact that, you know, yes, it is a big factory, but there's women sat at sewing machines, you know, sewing the same seam on the same t-shirt day in, day out for 12, 14, 16-hour days, you know, not being paid a living wage. And this idea that I had that, you know, surely it must be okay because they wouldn't be allowed to do it otherwise, really suddenly this realization that it's very much not okay, and they're allowed to do it despite that. And the year, you know, was easier than I anticipated it being in terms of being able to find the things that we wanted secondhand. But I guess it was, you know, this whole sort of opening of a can of worms, and this sometimes this like, God, I wish I hadn't looked. I wish I hadn't, you know, I wish I'd sort of stayed looking away with my head in the sand. Lily Cole, just looking because she's got her book up here, she's got a book out called Who Cares Wins. And in there she talks about, you know, if you dare to care, it's a head F word. And it kind of is. And that was, you know, where I came to at the end of the year, and this like, oh my God, I've discovered all this stuff and I can't now look away and pack it all away again. But really importantly came out of it with this sense of responsibility, this realization that, you know, we do genuinely, all our decisions have an impact, and that the importance, I guess, of us making better decisions more of the time when we can. So sort of fast forward 9 years on, and now there's this amazing online community. There's probably about 60,000 people on different platforms, and it's all around this idea of sustainable-ish, this idea of taking imperfect action. And I will talk about that in a bit more detail in a minute. Last year, I founded the Knackered Mums Eco Club, I think born out of a mild sense of frustration, I guess, that I sort of couldn't see a space for me in a lot of the green stereotypes that existed. So, you know, there are a huge amount of stereotypes, and, you know, our lovely Prime Minister doesn't help to diminish them by talking about, you know, climate activists as kind of, what does he say, mung bean eating, tree hugging, you know, bunny hugging, whatever it is. But I was just very aware that, you know, I was dropping the kids off at school in the playground, and that, you know, talking to friends, and had a sense that, you know, if I was brave enough to bounce up to them and ask them, are you worried about the climate crisis? They would probably say yes, but probably not really know what to do, where to go, not really see that there was a space for them, you know, to sort of do this and to try and fit it all in amongst everything else that's going on. So I wanted to create this space where you know, we could all come together and whinge about the kids and still make some really good stuff happen. And I've written 2 books. The Sustainable-ish Living Guide came out in January last year, and the Sustainable-ish Guide to Green Parenting came out in March of this year. And they're both very much aimed at the mainstream as much as a sort of eco book can be. I hopefully very, very accessible, very non-judgmental, and very sort of action orientated. So at the end of every chapter, there's sort of, you know, tick boxes of ideas for things to do and space to write your own actions that you're going to do. So, and I always say that the whole point of sort of all the things I do for doing talks like this or writing the book or whatever, the whole idea is that it will inspire some action, because nothing changes if nothing changes. So, you know, it's great reading books or listening to podcasts or coming to talks and things like that, but ultimately what we really want is for people to get up and be able to make a change happen. So as a little spoiler alert, I will be gently inviting you at the end to maybe pop into the chat or to put your hand up and sort of let us know a change that you're inspired to make as a result of this. So really briefly, the sort of the problem. Now, I'm guessing you're probably all, you know, this might be sort of preaching to the choir. The fact that you've come to a you know, a great big Green Week event probably means you're already kind of on board and aware of the issues that we're sort of dealing with. But it doesn't hurt to sort of go over them, I think, and not with the you know, to sort of freak anyone out or anything like that, but just so that we're kind of all on the same page. Because I think sometimes, certainly in the past, as a sort of community or whatever, we've been quite reticent almost to sort of talk about the consequences of the climate changing, because I think we're sort of worried that we don't want to scare people, whereas, you know, I think we're now seeing a bit of a step change in the latest IPCC report that came out quite recently, you know, was just like not hedging its bets anymore, was like, this is the issue, this is the problem, this is what's going to happen unless we change. So we're already, when we're talking about degrees of warming, you probably all already know, but it's talking about, it's comparing the global average temperatures to what they were pre-industrial revolution, so before we discovered we could burn stuff essentially to create energy, and we're already seeing we're about 1.2 1.3 degrees, and we're already seeing the sort of consequences of that with more extreme weather events. So even you know, very recently we've had flooding, flash floods in London, and flooding of the tube and then the metro in New York and things like that, and big floods in Germany, and you know, those are just the things that have been more commonly reported because they've been happening in the sort of Western developed world. We tend not to hear so much about the extreme weather events that are affecting vast swathes of the developing world. But I think, you know, another issue is maybe that degree of warming doesn't sound too bad, does it? What are we worried about? I wouldn't be able to tell you if it was 19 or 20 degrees outside. I couldn't tell you if my cup of tea was 90 or 89 degrees. Like, what's the big deal? But because of the way that the Earth's ecosystems and things are so finely balanced and sort of intertwined and things, you know, it really is a big deal. And what we really want, what we need to do is to limit warming to 1.5 degrees C. This is what the science is telling us. And to do that is entirely possible, but we would require unprecedented changes. This is what they said in the, not the very recent IPCC report, but the one before that. And I remember reading that and thinking, crikey, that sounds hard. I don't think we're going to be able to do that, are we? Unprecedented changes, what does that mean? So I had to go and look up in the dictionary. But unprecedented just means doing stuff we haven't done before. And, you know, I think we can all agree that in the last 18 months, we've pretty much nailed unprecedented. You know, we have done unprecedented, and we've kind of come through it. And obviously what we need is, you know, we need governments to be doing stuff they haven't done before. We need businesses to be doing stuff they haven't done before. But we also need us as individuals, as households, as families, to be doing stuff we haven't done before. Now, you know, we don't really like change, particularly as human beings, but it doesn't have to be really difficult. Lots and lots of little changes will add up and will really absolutely make a difference. So if nothing changes, we're going to absolutely smash through that 1.5 degree barrier by, you know, anywhere between 2030 and 2050, and on optimistic estimates that there will be around 3 degrees by the end of this century. Now, again, 3 degrees doesn't sound much, does it? And you see a lot of people going, well, that's lovely, isn't it? Warmer summers, who could say no to that? But actually, you know, at 3 degrees, we are talking potentially kind of apocalyptic type scenarios. We are talking, you know, millions of climate refugees. We are talking a scarcity of fresh water. We are talking, you know, an increase in conflict, all these kinds of things. And, you know, this isn't the kind of world that any of us wants. This isn't the kind of world that we would want to, for our children, for our grandchildren. And I think for me, it starts to become really real when I start to think about how old my kids are going to be in 2030 and 2040 and 2050. So, you know, by 2030, if we haven't made significant inroads and real significant progress, I may well be looking at my 22-year-old children and saying, sorry about that. Do you know, like, yeah, we knew we didn't do enough, sorry. You know, we may well have reached some tipping points that are irreversible, and that terrifies the pants off me, basically. And that's the big driver behind doing what I do. So this idea, I think, and I know that David Attenborough talks about this in some of his recent documentaries, that, you know, the decisions that we're making today, and, you know, the decisions that governments are making, the decisions that businesses are making, but a lot of the really dull, mundane decisions that we're making about what we're going to eat, what we're going to wear, how we're going to travel, all those sorts of things are really critical in ensuring this safe and sustainable world that we want for us now and for our kids and for future generations. It might make you feel a bit like this. It certainly does with me when I allow myself to stop and think about it. But I think, you know, the good news is that that's the problem and essentially the problem is people and, you know, our overconsumption and our addiction to fossil fuels and all that kind of thing. The solution therefore is us as well. And this is one of my all-time favorite quotes by Jane Goodall, that you cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do, what we do, makes a difference, and we have to decide what kind of a difference we want to make, which sounds quite high pressure, doesn't it? But, you know, I will come back all the time to this concept of sustainable-ish, this concept of imperfect action, and this idea that, you know, nobody's going to make the best decision every single time, but it's about making better decisions more of the time. And I talk a lot about the power of us as individuals, and some criticism that sometimes gets leveled at me is that that's not fair, that it shouldn't all be on individuals, and the government and businesses are sort of shunting you know, putting the emphasis on individuals to let them off the hook. And absolutely, of course we need government action, of course we need business action, but we have a huge role to play as individuals in putting the pressure on governments and businesses to take action. And also remember that governments and businesses are made up of individuals. So can you just imagine if Boris Johnson decided, oh my God, like, you know, just had a little baby, this is absolutely, you know, this is where the line is drawn. We are now you know, a climate action government, and we are going to do everything possible. Wow. Can you imagine if the CEO of Coca-Cola, BP, Shell decided that? I don't know how we make them do that, but that is you know, that is a possibility. So that we have a huge amount of power as individuals. And there's sort of 4 areas really that I want to sort of highlight, I guess. So we have a huge amount of power as consumers. The power of our money at the checkout is really, really powerful. And we just need to look at the rise in the popularity of like vegan food and plant-based food. You know, it's become so mainstream, and that has all been sort of consumer-led and consumer power. There's another brilliant quote by a lady called Anna Lappe that says something like, every time you spend money, you're casting a vote for the kind of world that you want. And I remember the first time I read that, or the first time I heard that, it being a real sort of almost light bulb moment, this idea that I'm choosing who to give my money to, and I'm choosing, with that, I'm sort of voting for that product or that way of doing things. So if we think about organic food, or we think about ethical clothing, or you know, those kinds of things, and for me that's, you know, that's really, really powerful, and that was a big driver for me in trying to make better decisions more of the time. You know, it's not that you know, oh my God, if you buy anything from Amazon you're an awful person. No one's saying that. It's that actually, can we you know, because we're always going to have the times where we've forgotten someone's birthday, or the kids need something for school the next day, or whatever, but actually if we can try and just make more kinder decisions, then, you know, they absolutely do all add up. We also have a huge amount of power as citizens, and I think we forget this. We forget about the power of our voices, the power of our citizen voice as well. So, you know, we live in a democratic country. We all have elected representatives. It might feel sometimes, depending on where we live, that our vote is a wasted vote. I live in a very safe Tory constituency. I'm not quite sure what he has to do to lose his seat. But that doesn't mean that we can't make our voices heard with them. So that doesn't mean that you know, we can't be emailing our MPs, asking them, you know, what the situation is regarding a certain bill, asking them what they're going to be voting on a certain bill, letting them know that this is an issue for us. Because there was a study done in 2017 asking MPs why they weren't taking more action on the climate crisis, and the vast majority of them said that it was because they weren't hearing from their constituents that it was an issue for them. So we absolutely, you know, we've got COP26 coming up. We need to be letting our government know that we are watching them, that we are expecting, you know, results from this, and that we will be, I don't know, stamping our feet very crossly if it doesn't. You know, the politicians, businesses will follow the money, politicians will follow the vote. If they are convinced enough that they're going to, you know, that this is an issue that the public really cares about and is prepared to vote on, and they will absolutely start to create change around this. So never forget that. Also remember the power of your voice when it comes to your consumer choices as well. So if you do I don't know, the example of your supermarket shop, and you unpack it and, you know, there's always the sort of small mountain of plastic packaging left at the end, isn't there, after you've put it all away. Well, you know, you can absolutely send an email, a Facebook message, a tweet to the supermarket and say, oh gosh, guys, I thought, you know, you would really had some great plans to make progress on single-use packaging. Can you let me know where you're up to with that, or where you're going? Because I'm getting really frustrated with all this plastic. Or, you know, if you do something like move your energy supplier or something, you can, you know, get in touch with the people who you're moving away from to say, just thought I'd let you know I'm giving my little pot of money to somebody else whose values I really support, because I don't agree with what you guys are doing. You can amplify the actions that you take every single time you do one. We also have a huge amount of power as influencers, and I think lots of people might not really embrace that label, if you like, as an influencer, but we're all influencers, even if we're not swanning around pouting on Instagram with lots of hashtags. We're all influencers, and the things that we do, the conversations that we have, will influence the people around us, you know, regardless of whether we're particularly trying or not. It's that kind of show don't tell thing a lot of the time. So you know, it will influence the people that live in our houses with us, it will influence our friends, our colleagues, all those kinds of things. So sometimes by being seen to do some things, and it can be as simple as, you know, taking your reusable coffee cup with you, or remembering your water bottle, or saying no to a single-use cup when you're at an event or something like that, you're giving other people permission to do those things as well. And you're also kind of letting people see, you know, the more people we see, the more making these changes, the more likely we are to see people like us. And we are, because we're that sort of herd animal, that herd mentality, and we like to fit in as human beings. If we can see other people like us, regardless of what we look like, doing these things, we will, you know, we're making it easier for other people to do it as well. So never doubt how much influence you have. And then the last sort of category, if you like, is this idea of us as change agents. And I always feel like at this point, we need 007 names, or we need, you know, spyglasses or something like this. But this idea of us as change agents is the idea that we can be the people sort of gently agitating for change within any organizations that we're involved with. So whether that's where our place of work, whether that's our kids' school, whether that's any you know, sort of football clubs or brownies or choirs or whatever it might be, we can be the one within those organizations just asking the questions, just gently asking the questions. I often give the example, I did a series of podcasts for an organization called Good with Money, who are all about ethical investments and things like that. And in it, I was sort of talking to various asset managers, I think they're called investment managers, something like that, and was speaking to a guy in a bank, and they in his bank didn't have a sort of ethical investing arm. And he spoke to a colleague, and they were both like, I really feel quite strongly that we should have an ethical investing arm. So they both went, you know, to the powers that be in their organization and sort of said, oh, you know, why don't we have an ethical investing arm? Can we have an ethical investing arm? And, you know, sure enough, these two people were given the responsibility of starting up the ethical investing arm of that business, which now has, I don't know, probably millions and millions of pounds invested in it. So sometimes it just needs one person to sort of to speak out, to ask the question. You know, a slightly less highly powered example is when I used to be a vet, and when I was in practice, I would be, you know, diligently doing my recycling at home and going into work, and there was no recycling, and it was really bugging me, but I didn't feel that I had any agency particularly to sort of effect any change. But after a while I got so frustrated and felt a little bit braver, and went and spoke to the practice manager and said, this was really odd, why aren't we doing any recycling? And yeah, sure enough, like, great question, yeah, absolutely agree with you, just, you know, never get round to it on the list. Can you do some research into recycling, you know, and implementing a recycling infrastructure in the practice? So, you know, we can absolutely be that person, whether it's with the school PTA or anything like that, and it doesn't have to be you know, very adversarial, confrontational. It can just be a you know, a series of gentle questions, a series of suggestions. You know, often you may be the one that gets sort of shoehorned into sort of helping to implement them, but you know, we absolutely can be asking for change in other organizations as well. So hopefully that leaves you feeling sort of a little bit empowered. But it might also leave you feeling like, oh my God, like oh God, I've got to, you know, I've got to be an influencer, and I've got to be a change agent, and I've got to be tweeting my MP, and I'm just struggling to get through the day most of the time. So remember all the time, and we'll come back to this again and again, the idea of sustainable-ish. So it's a word I made up, but you know, for me, it's about making the best choices that we can, that work for us, for our families, and that work for the planet as well, and being really accepting and open to the fact that we're all starting from different places. We've all got different challenges and circumstances. No change is too small. I think that's one thing that really puts a lot of us off even starting, is the thought that, oh God, well, if I'm going to be green, I've got to be vegan, and I've got to stop flying, and I've got to get out the car, and I've got to do this. Actually, no, you don't. There's a lovely sort of cartoon that's been doing the rounds on social media, and it's got sort of two ladders next to each other, one with sort of the rungs spaced very far apart, and one with the rungs much closer together, you know, and the person's just stuck on the bottom with the ones further apart, unable to reach that first rung, whereas when it's got lots of steps in between, they're much more able and much more quickly able to sort of get up to that first big rung. So for me, it's all about this idea of, you know, we're not expecting people to go from A to Z. We're just asking you to go from A to A.1, and then A to A.1 to A.2, that kind of thing. And it's and the whole idea, we're aiming for progress, not perfection. A lot of these changes don't have to be all or nothing. You know, one of the examples I give a lot is when in the last school that our youngest was at, it was sort of cyclable distance, about 3.5 miles away. But he would adamantly, like, we would have such arguments about cycling, either to or from school, because he's too tired. And so what I would do would be to, you know, put the bike on the back of the car, drive him to school, cycle home again, cycle back to school to pick him up and drive him home again. And wasn't perfect solution, you know, I'm sure some people would berate me and say I should just put my foot down, but actually it meant that it was reducing our school footprint, car print, whatever it was, by 50% on those days that we did it. So, you know, don't let perfect stop you getting started. I can't remember what the phrase is. And all the time, you know, remember, focus on the things that you can change and not the things that you can't, because there will be some things that require much bigger system changes, and absolutely we can be putting pressure on those systems and asking them to change, but let's not allow them to get us stuck, and let's think about lots of the things that we can change. So these two pictures are just to say that, you know, I think it's very easy to feel like there's this green hierarchy, and that we're sort of starting at the bottom and we're tiptoeing our way in, and we're the very lightest shade of green, and that we've got to work our way up in a very linear fashion, you know, all through all the different levels like a computer game, until we're peak green at the top, and we're knitting our own yogurt, and we're living off grid, and, you know, all these things that maybe a lot of us might not even aspire to. But that actually the reality, or certainly my reality, is very much like this bottom picture, where it's just messy splodge of different shades of green, and I'm different shades of green in different areas of my life, when it's locked down, when it's not locked down, when I'm homeschooling, when I'm you know, depending on how annoying the children are being, all those kinds of things, and that's absolutely okay, and that should never you know, the fear of not being green enough should never stop us from getting started. So we've got about 5 or 6, I can never remember, slides or areas where I think, you know, we can make a pretty decent impact as individuals. And the first one is conscious consumption, which sounds really dull, I'm very aware, very unaspirational, very grown up. You know, we live in a very consumer society. We are very used to conspicuous consumption rather than conscious consumption. And like I said, you know, before we did our year buying nothing new, we didn't really stop and think about what we were buying other than how much it cost. So this idea of conscious consumption is about trying to think more about what we're buying and trying to slow down how much we're buying, because I'm just partway through a book at the moment called The Day the World Stops Shopping, by a guy called J.B. McKinnon. And in there he talks about the fact that, I think he says from about the year 2000, consumption overtook population as a sort of one of the key drivers of climate change, and that you know, actually it's the rate with which we're consuming is a really, really significant driver. So household consumption is responsible for more than 60% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And this is a stat I discovered when I was writing the first book. And it's like, oh, that sounds a lot. I need to check that. And it is a lot. But actually, it's if you flip it, it's quite empowering, because it means that, you know, we can slow down our consumption. We can consume more slowly and differently, and we can make inroads therefore on that 60%, you know, we by doing that. So I think it's a really quite an empowering stat. Better educated households as well generally have higher consumption levels and therefore emissions. So the world's richest 10%, I think, emit something like 52% of greenhouse gas emissions. The vast majority, or, you know, a lot of people in the UK will be amongst the world's richest 10%. You need to be earning, I think it's something like more than 27 grand a year to be part of the world's richest 10%. You need to be earning more than £100,000 a year to be the world's richest 1%. And the world's richest 1% produce more emissions than the world's poorest 50%. So there is a massive mismatch there. And actually, it's the world's poorest people who will be experiencing the worst effects of the climate crisis. So, you know, if one of your values is kind of fairness, then you can see that there's, you know, we're living in a very unfair, unbalanced world. So always remember, the most sustainable version of anything is the one we already own. Really dull, isn't it? I'm so sorry. We all, you know, I feel the lure still, having spent a year buying nothing new, I still feel the lure of shiny new things. You know, we get that dopamine hit. It's very, very countercultural not to buy things. Those of you who were on just before we started, I was saying, you know, I did a TEDx talk in Bedford when we were doing our year buying nothing new, and the theme of the talks for the day was everyday radicals. And I just remember going, why are you inviting me to this? I'm not radical. But the realization that not buying new things is a very, very radical act in the society that we live in, that, you know, it's sort of gently disrupting the status quo every time you don't buy something, every time you repair something, every time you refuse to upgrade your phone, even though Apple's, you know, bombarding you with emails about it. That this is quite a disruptive act. So the picture here is, it's called The Hierarchy of Needs by an amazing woman called Sarah Lazarovich in Canada, obviously based very loosely on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, with the idea that we start at the bottom and we work our way up. And I just love this picture. I think it's just such a useful sort of memory jolt, or, you know, something to think about when we're thinking about buying something. And in fact, Sarah very kindly let us reproduce this in both of the books that I wrote. And one of my friends, one of my old uni friends, she sort of copied it out and has pinned it to the fridge. And now every time her kids ask her if they want, you know, that they want something, she's like, hold on a minute, girls, let's have a little look at the hierarchy. So I'm like, oh God, your kids must absolutely hate me. But we need to start at the bottom with using what we have. And I interviewed Sarah for my podcast, and she talks about, you know, this bottom bit being, you know, repair, being upcycling, being rooting around in the drawer of doom in the kitchen for the packet of batteries that we kind of know is in there, but we can't be bothered to look because it's going to be a real hassle and we're going to feel guilty about the amount of crap that's in the drawer, you know, that kind of thing. So it's really important that we look around and we use what we have. I think when we think, oh, I want to be, you know, I've had this epiphany or whatever, or it's been nagging away at me for a while, I'm going to be greener. What do I need to buy? You know, and then we look on social media, we look on Instagram, and we need the coffee cup and the water bottle and the tote bags and the Kilner jars. Everyone has lovely, gorgeous Kilner jars. Actually, the crappy Tupperware that you've got will do just as well. You know, the free coffee cup you were given at that event or whatever, that will do. It's very easy to get sort of sucked into a sort of eco-consumer role. So, you know, absolutely, if you are buying something, try and buy better. But more important than that, try and use what you already have. So if we move up a level and we look at borrowing, obviously we can borrow, you know, from friends and family and things like that. And I always think, you know, if there's something that you need for a short period, it's absolutely worth putting a shout out there on social media or whatever to see if anyone's got something you can borrow. But there are more and more sort of borrowing, slightly more formal borrowing opportunities happening around the country and around the world. So in Edinburgh, there's an amazing organisation called the Edinburgh Tool Library, which is a library but for tools. So you can go and you can borrow the tools that you need. There's a statistic that the average drill is only used for 13 minutes in its lifetime. So we don't all need to own a drill. We just need to have access to one. There's in London, there's an organisation called the Library of Things that are, you know, it's like a library, but it's for things, and they will have things like pressure washers, or I think they might do tents for sort of festivals and things like that, and sanders and things like that. I'm just up the road from Frome in Somerset, and they had the UK's first share shop, and they've got all manner of things in there that you can go and borrow. So like this time of year, they've got preserving kits and stuff, you know, for if you've got a bit of an allotment glut. They've got, you know, if you're a grandparent and you've got grandchildren coming to stay, they've got toys and high chairs and things like that. And it's just this brilliant idea, and obviously allows resources to be kept in use for much longer, and means that, you know, we're not having to find the space to keep these things, all that kind of thing. And there are more and more of these sort of popping up. I think there's one in Bristol, there's one in Bath. I don't know, I mean, if you guys might know if there's anything. Corey's put the link to Library of Things in there, but you guys might know if there are a lot of transition groups and sort of sustainability groups that have started their own little versions and that kind of thing. So, you know, if there isn't one near you, maybe that's somebody can have a think about whether that's something that they want to think about. When we move up another layer and we're looking at swapping. So again, this is something you can do really informally, but you know, so you could do, with Christmas coming up, get together with some friends with kids a similar age, you know, and all have had a sort out with your toys, get together for coffee or whatever, and you know, you can just do a bit of a swap of toys. I did one when my kids were littler at the toddler group that we went to. You know, we just all had a sort out, and just sort of put them all on a table, and you could come and take what you wanted to. We had a swap shop at school when my kids got a bit bigger, as a sort of after school event. I think we just let the kids, we just got everyone to bring in stuff over a week beforehand, put it all out in the hall, and we let the kids come in and take what they wanted. I mean, we could have done it as a fundraiser easily and charged them all £1 to come in, and you know, that kind of thing. So that's really lovely. And then clothes swaps or swishes are really lovely events, and I've run a few in town. They're really great because you get people coming who wouldn't necessarily come to a green event. They probably wouldn't come to a great big green week talk or something like that, but they come because it's a nice social event. We did it on a Friday night. We, you know, in a pub, we used they let us use the Skittle Alley. You know, we had a mirror so people could try stuff on and things like that. And it's just a really nice way, a gentle way of starting some conversations around fast fashion, around resource usage, also while people are having a bit of fun and getting some new to them clothes. So they're a really nice thing to do. And you know, again, if you're in an office, that might be something. You can just have a couple of clothes rails in an office for a week, and everyone bring in their stuff and swap it. Making is on there, and I always feel like, oh gosh, you know, asking people to make things when they're already, everybody's so busy and that sort of thing. But you know, please remember that making is great because it really sort of reconnects you to your stuff, and quite how much effort, time, skill, resources go into our stuff. But it doesn't have to be like crazy things. So again, I feel awful talking about Christmas in September, but I know it's on a lot of people's minds already. I quite like baking, so I will batch bake some things for Christmas, or if the kids are going to a party, I will bake shortbread biscuits and use number cutters to cut them into like 6s or 8s or however old the birthday child is going to be, that kind of thing. So just, you know, thinking about, have you got any skills and can you utilize them to mean that you're buying a bit less stuff a bit more of the time. And then at the top we've got buy. So, you know, obviously it's not saying never buy anything new again. It can be done. Like I said, we did it for a year. We're much more relaxed about it now, but it has definitely made us much more conscious consumers. Oh, I missed out thrift. I jumped over thrift. So thrift is buying stuff secondhand. So, you know, have a look at eBay. car boot sales, charity shops, but also, you know, especially if you're looking for clothes, there's a couple of great apps, one called Depop, which always makes me feel very old when I go on there, because I think it's very much for the young people, and another one called Vinted, which has, you know, loads of clothes on there, really easy. You can filter it for what you want. You can look kids clothes as well, so they're really useful. And you know, a little invitation maybe if anybody wants to take this up is to try a buy nothing new month, maybe, because it's all about that mindset shift. And, you know, I found that, and I think probably a lot of us do this, we consume very unconsciously, very sort of knee-jerky, very reactively. And actually the fact that you've then got to find something secondhand really does make you stop and think, do I really want or need this? Okay, so where can I find it? Am I prepared to wait for it? All those kinds of things that we're just not used to doing anymore with our sort of 24/7 consumer culture. So yeah, so back to buy, you know, if you are buying new, have a look. Is there an organic version, a sustainable version? Is there a local independent shop you can support? And again, nobody's expecting you to make a, you know, the sound ethical decision every single time, but you know, in the Knackered Mums Eco Club, you know, we've got people saying, oh, I'm going to try and have an Amazon free Christmas, or, you know, actually I'm going to, when we were talking about we did a month on consumption, and people saying, you know, they were really aware that they'd sort of fallen into the Amazon trap over lockdowns and things like that, and that they were going to try and reduce their Amazon habit by like 50% or something like that. So so you know, again, remember, all these times it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Sometimes we want to buy, we'll need something at a certain price in a certain time scale, all those kinds of things, and of course that's always going to happen. But on the times where we maybe do have a bit more budget, or we do have a bit more time, can we make a bit of a better decision? So zero waste, it's quite a daunting term, isn't it? Zero waste. I can never be zero waste, but let's whack an ish on the end and it feels a bit more doable, doesn't it, for all of us? And we've got a hierarchy here, another hierarchy. So, you know, again, the idea that we start at the bottom and we're working our way up, because sadly, you know, pretty much everything that we buy, we will end up throwing away at some point. So, thinking about those concepts of on the hierarchy for the sort of refuse and reduce. And I think especially when it comes to things like fashion, in terms of trying to slow down and reduce the amount of clothes that we're buying. So the fashion industry accounts for about 10% of greenhouse gas emissions, which when we compare it to aviation, which, you know, is the sort of poster boy of badness for the climate, is 2 to 4%. So actually fashion is really, really impactful. So let's see if we can just slow down the amount of clothes that we're buying. Again, you know, can you say, well, I'm not going to buy any new clothes this month, or I'm going to buy only secondhand clothes this month, or I'm going to buy 50% less clothes, or whatever it might be, to try and reduce that. Reuse, we will talk about on the next slide, particularly in terms of plastic, but you know, 9 times out of 10 a reusable product is going to be better than a single use one, with the absolutely enormous caveat that you do actually remember to reuse it, because I'm sure we've all seen those stats about, you know, a cotton tote bag needs to be used 20, 100, 300, 2,000 times, from whatever source you're looking at. So, you know, it's really important. A lot of these reusable products use a lot more resources. So we really do need to be making sure that we reuse them. And some of that will be around habit change, especially in terms of some of those single use products. But when we're thinking about things like wipes or nappies, again, just see if you can kind of wean yourself in, just go in slowly. You know, reusable nappies can feel really daunting to start off with, but, you know, maybe go and find a nappy library, or talk to somebody you know who uses them, and maybe you can just get a couple to try out at home to start with. And, you know, I think reusable wipes are really nice into that sort of reusable world and thing like that, to have a think about what the things that you can reuse. Rehoming, so, you know, if we've got stuff we don't want or need, it's really easy to have a bit of a clear out and just bung it all at the charity shop. But remember, they can only sell it on if it's in good condition, if it's clean, if it's, you know, it doesn't need fixing, all those kinds of things. So be really careful that we don't fall into the trap of using the charity shop as our sort of panacea to continue to overconsume, because remember, we've got to do these other bits on the hierarchy first. And, you know, always remember as well that the sort of other outlets there are for rehoming stuff, so things like FreeCycle and Freegal, or if you're I don't know how active the Olio app is around you guys, you can put stuff on there that can sort of go out to local communities and stuff like that, so those can be really helpful. I'm throwing a load of links at you. I've got a document that I can send to Corey that's got all the links on them, so he can kind of circulate them out to you guys, so you're not having to sort of frantically write down lots of links. Moving up a level, we've got repair. So I don't know, do you guys have a repair cafe near you in Bedford? These are sort of volunteer run pop-up sort of events where there will be a team of volunteers on hand to fix your broken stuff. Basically anything that you can carry there, they should have somebody there who can fix it. So it would be textiles, computers, small electricals, bric-a-brac, all that kind of thing. They started off in the Netherlands and they've spread globally. There are hundreds around the UK, and hopefully they're all sort of starting up again now as restrictions sort of continue to ease. So, you know, do have a look. And I always think with something broken, you can't make it any worse. So always have a look on YouTube and see if there's a video or something that's telling you how you can fix these things. Brilliant, you do have a repair cafe. That's absolutely awesome. Recycling, I think the really interesting thing about recycling on this one is that it's the sort of penultimate, you know, it's almost a last resort. So absolutely do have a look, do check what your local authority will recycle, you know, refresh yourself with that because it will change. But remember, we got all these other things below. So, you know, a reusable packaging is going to be better than recyclable, all those kinds of things. And then at the very top, we've got rot. So obviously, you know, landfill, but also thinking about composting, thinking about wormeries for food waste and things like that can be really helpful. Right, I'm going to rattle through these last few so that we've got time in case people have got any questions. And I'm aware that, you know, that each of them in their own right is a big topic that we could do it easily an hour on. But plastic free, the concept of plastic free, again, we'll whack an ish on it because it sounds too daunting. And essentially, when we're talking about plastic, we're talking about single-use plastic. And this idea that, you know, almost half of the plastic produced is single use, and it's just thrown away, then rots in landfill. And when we start to think about plastic, it can very quickly become very overwhelming because we suddenly realize just how ubiquitous it is. So if you are thinking, oh God, where do I even start? Then the big four, the most commonly used single-use plastics are a great place to start. So there'll be shopping bags, coffee cups, water bottles, and straws. Now, I know coffee cups, you know, sort of almost became quite normal, didn't they? And then the pandemic hit, and now we're sort of back to that awkwardness of like, can I take my coffee cup? Are they going to accept it? Are they going to tell me off? I know you had Natalie Fee on, I think it was last night, from City to Sea. And City to Sea have a great campaign called Contactless Coffee at the moment, whereby they've got this lovely video that shows how you can take your coffee cup into a coffee shop and they can, you know, they can fill it up without the barista actually having to touch it. So if you have got a local independent coffee shop or even one of the chains and they're a bit reticent about taking reusable cups now things are reopening, you know, maybe say, look, would you guys mind just having a quick look at this video, because hopefully it will reassure you that, you know, this is a nice safe thing to do, and I know you guys were doing a good job before COVID and all that kind of thing. Another great sort of resource from City to Sea is the Refill app for water bottles. Corey's just put the link on there for you, so you can download the app and it will allow you to sort of see places, cafes, shops, whatever nearby that will allow you to fill up your water bottle when you're out and about, so they can be really, really helpful. With all of these things, especially these sort of, you know, these big four, it's about the habit change. It's about creating a new normal for you. So, you know, getting into a habit of always having a shopping bag with you, just one of the little ones that can go in your bag or your car or whatever. You know, always remember, you know, can you put a post-it note on your phone that says coffee cup, so you remember to take it with you when you leave in the morning, that kind of thing. Thinking about how you can make it as easy as possible for you to do these things. So whizzing on to food, food is a big part, it's responsible for 1/4 of all global emissions, but also for about 1/4 of the average individual footprint here in the UK. And one of the narratives we hear a lot is reducing meat and dairy, which absolutely, you know, is really good to be moving towards that. But I don't think we talk enough about food waste, and food waste is a massive issue. It actually, reducing food waste just pips going vegan in terms of sort of impact. And if food waste were a country, it would be the 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases after the USA and China. And actually, this is where it gets really exciting if you're a geek like me. Half of all food waste occurs in the home. So again, this is another of those stats that we can really do something about. And it will save us money as well. I think the average family in the UK is supposed to waste about £700 a year on food that is just never eaten. So a couple of, again, quite dull, quite grown-up things to do, but a meal plan is super, super helpful. So before you go shopping, have a little look, see what's in the fridge, see what's in the freezer that needs eating up, that's going to go out of date. Plan your meals around that, you know, and also have a look and see who's going to be in, because there's no point having cooked a big meal if actually, you know, you've just got 5 minutes in between the school run and clubs, or actually it turns out that you've forgotten about a club or whatever. So have a look at your week, how your week's panning out and where you can fit things in. And as well, try, you know, maybe leave a bit of white space for those days where you are just a bit knackered. And remember that doing a meal plan doesn't have to be 2 hours on a Sunday evening with Nigella, you know, looking over you and going through all the recipe books. It's you know, beans on toast can go on there. It's just having an idea of what's going to be eaten when, to limit the amount of stuff that the chances of stuff being wasted. And then the other thing to do that is a bit more fun is to maybe have an eat me first box or fridge, and box or shelf in your fridge, so that everybody knows that that's the stuff that's going out of date, that's the stuff that's been opened, that's the stuff that needs eating first, so it doesn't get shoved to the back and forgotten about. That can be quite a useful thing to do as well. Last one. So my top tip is always switch to a renewable energy tariff. I'm aware that this week that has suddenly become a lot more complicated and a lot more anxiety inducing, maybe, with a lot of the you know, because sadly a lot of the companies that have either gone under or in danger of going under are the smaller and some of the renewable companies. Here in the UK, the two market leaders are Ecotricity and Good Energy. They have both put out you know, on their socials that they have contingency plans in place for this, that they have the right insurances in place, that the way they've run their businesses mean that they are, you know, in a really solid position. So if you are looking to swap, you know, and it is still a really useful thing to do, then it might be that at the moment you try and have a little look at those two. But it can slash your carbon footprint. I mean, this one about a quarter actually comes from Bulb, and I couldn't find any sources to back it up, but actually from what, you know, the research I've done, I reckon it can easily cut your carbon footprint by about 10%. And once it's done, it's done. You know, you can, and it can take 20 minutes and it's done, and you get to sort of bask in your nice warm eco glow. And the other really powerful thing that I think we often aren't aware of or we don't think about is actually moving our money. So a lot of our money, whether it's in a current account, in savings or in pensions, will be being invested in the fossil fuel industry. So have a little look. There's a great website called switchit.money. You can even have a look now whilst you're listening to the end of this. Look on switchit.money. There'll be a drop-down list of banks on there. You can pick your bank and it will tell you how well or otherwise they're performing, and will give you some suggestions of ones you might want to move to that will not be doing quite such nasty things with your money. So here in the UK, Triodos are probably the market leader. Co-op do quite well. The building societies tend to do a little bit better. So it's, you know, it's definitely worth moving. And if you are moving your money, letting the people you're moving away from knowing why. And pensions are a huge pot of money. A lot of it is being invested in fossil fuels. So there's a great campaign called Make My Money Matter running at the moment. And again, they will have you know, a drop down box on there for you to pick your pension provider, and it will tell you whether or not they have committed to, I think it's something like net zero investments by 2030. And moving your pension sounds like a real pain in the bum, and it kind of is. But what you might be able to do is move within your pension provider may well have a sustainable pot that they can move your money to, and that can be done quite easily. My husband did that, and it's just that it's not the default pot for a lot of pensions. So, you know, really doing that is a hugely powerful thing to do. And then a couple of last quick things on the internet. Have a go, switch your browser to Ecosia. It's a search engine that plants trees with its ad revenue. Remember to do it, you know, on your mobile and things as well. And then deleting and unsubscribing from emails, because, you know, we think of the internet as this sort of cloudy thing that's just nice, innocuous, not doing any harm to anyone. But actually, you know, it's taking a huge amount of energy and electricity to run it. So the less we have stored, the less sort of useless stuff we have cluttering up our servers, the better. So, you know, I did a challenge with my audience, and in 5 days people deleted between them 250,000, so 250,000 emails, which when I did the maths worked out about 2.5 tons of carbon, which is about a quarter of a person's annual carbon footprint. So it's definitely, that's one of those things where all these little things really do add up. So here's my invitation to just do one thing, you know, as a result of this today. Just this idea, you know, imagine if every single one of us believed that what we did would make a difference. And this lovely quote from Greta, no one is too small to make a difference. Everyone can do something. If everyone did something, then huge differences can happen. So I'm going to stop sharing. We've got about 2 minutes, I think. If anyone's got any questions, if anybody's, Corey's got loads of great links he's put in the chat there for stuff that's happening and some of the other great talks that have been happening this week. But yeah, if anyone wants to be brave and either pop in the chat an action that they're going to take, I don't care how small or imperfect it is, or if anyone wants to unmute and say, or if anyone's got any questions, then please do shout. Hello. Look at the blue sky near you, Lydia. That looks awesome.
Hello. I was just gonna say it. Sorry, I was late getting in. Sorry,
Don't worry, don't worry.
The rest was, it was really brilliant though. I was just wondering, is there like obviously we're all wet. Well, some of us are still wearing masks and things. I've got quite early on. I was like, I don't want to be wearing the disposable ones, so I have got one that I wash. But of course, there's always the filters that I put in. And so I'm cutting up Hoover filters, not actually by, so that was like kind of my little way of trying to be a little bit better about it. But I still have to throw them away and I still kind of get through quite a lot. And I just wonder if you had any tips on the best masks or filters.
I mean,
suggestions at all. But
whether I'm really slack, I don't bother with a filter. You know, if for peace of mind and things, if you're wanting to use a filter, that's great. There is an organization, I think they're called Reworked, and they do PPE recycling boxes. And so they will take masks, gloves, aprons, the waste from lateral flow tests. And the boxes are, I want to say that the small ones are about 50 quid, and that includes sending them off. So it might be that, you know, an organization in Bedford is interested. You know, I tried to get our school to do it, but you might be able to find somewhere local. I know, you know, I was doing some work with a guy who's a vet, and he, you know, they set up one in their veterinary practice and things like that. So it might be, Corey's just put the link in there for you. It might be that you can find somewhere locally that's doing that, and then you can put the filters in there, which is, you know, obviously better than binning them.
That's a good point. I had thought about the lateral flow as well, because I'm doing those
I know, it's awful, isn't it?
Yeah, I was thinking, goodness, there's all this packaging and
yes, yeah.
As you say, certain things have gone. You feel like they've gone backwards a bit, yes, like the coffee cups and stuff. And so that was really interesting what you're saying about this video. I'll have a look at that.
Yeah, have a look at it. It's great. Yeah, brilliant. Michelle, are you quite happy? Anything from you? Sorry, I feel really mean putting people on the spot, but as there's only a few of us on it.
Yeah, I'm happy, thanks. I found the bank thing interesting. I've just looked mine up and it's terrible. So.
Oh, I know, the high street banks are awful. So yeah, I mean, I know it feels like a real pain in the bum to move banks, but they, you know, remember they do all have this direct debit guarantee now, so they will, you know, ensure that all your direct debits get moved across, and they'll compensate you if they don't, and that kind of thing. So, you know, it isn't a kind of, yeah, I'll do that 5-minute decision, but it is, you know, if you can get round to it, it probably is something.
Yeah, definitely something to think about that I've not even thought about before.
I know, it took me ages to cotton on as well. Yeah. Brilliant. So I will send this document with all the links to Corey, and he can send it out to everyone who's registered. But yeah, thank you all so much for coming, and enjoy the rest of Big Green Week.
Thank you very much.
All right, brilliant. Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.